Good evening. We're excited to be online with you all tonight. Today, we launched Amplify Action. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to sharing more about Amplify's mission, and we welcome your questions. So please add them in the chat box, and we'll answer them during our Q&A session. My name is Brandon Upson. I'm the Executive Director of Amplify Action. I was born right here in South Carolina. I'm a Southerner. I'm a combat veteran of the United States Army. I'm a husband and a proud father of 3 beautiful children. But above all of these things, I'm a Black man, and I'm a proud Black man. Today, we launch Amplify Action to reach Black men across the Southeast, specifically in South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. Following the recent murder of our dear brother, George Floyd, we are all called to do everything in our power to fight in our communities against racism, discrimination, and injustice in every part of our system. We are called to amplify the voices and the unique experiences of our brothers in this work. We are called to transform our communities by moving Black men to organize, vote in elections, run for office, and advocate for the policies that will create substantial change that we seek to find in our communities. It's time for tangible solutions. Tonight, you will hear from the senior leadership about what the work of Amplify Action is all about. You'll hear from some of our partners and key supporters as well about why Amplify Action is needed at this very moment. I truly believe that we've been prepared for such a time as this, and I want to share with you how you can also get involved in this movement. Before we proceed this evening, I must recognize that we cannot do this work without the love and the support of our beautiful Black sisters. It takes all of us to build a community that is fair, equitable, and just for all. I am proud to work closely with our next speaker on the Amplify senior leadership team, Ms. Yeladria Drummond. Next, you will hear from Yeladria, who serves as our Chief Programs Officer, for a special introduction. Yeladria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Thank you for this introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yeladria Drummond. I serve as the Chief Programs Officer for Amplify Action. I am a native of Houston, Texas, a lawyer, political consultant, and compliance officer. Above all things, I am a wife to a strong Black man, a mother to 2 beautiful, intelligent Black boys. I work every day for Amplify Action to stand in solidarity with our Black men to make a difference in their lives through civic engagement. I stand in solidarity so that my sons will not have to grow up to experience the same social issues we are facing today. Tonight, I am proud to introduce a brilliant political mind, a leader in our community, Jaime Harrison. Jaime is the Democratic nominee running to represent South Carolina in the United States Senate. The son of a single teenage mom and raised by his grandparents in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Jaime overcame the challenges of grinding poverty through the support of teachers and mentors in his community. Jaime served as an aide to Congressman James Clyburn for many years, and then worked for some of the biggest employers in South Carolina, such as the Port of Charleston and the University of South Carolina. In 2013, Jaime was elected the first African-American chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party, a position he held until 2017. Jaime and his wife, Marie, live in Columbia, South Carolina, where they raise their 2 young children. We are grateful for Jaime's leadership in South Carolina, leadership that has opened doors for so many. Without further ado, I introduce Jaime Harrison. Jaime, you have the floor.
Hello. Hey, everybody. It's Jaime Harrison. Yeladria, thank you so much for that introduction. And Brandon, thank you so much for your leadership Listen, it is so good to hear about the launch of this initiative with Amplify Action. It is so desperately needed right now. Again, thank you all for your leadership in putting this together. We need to make sure that Black voices are heard, are seen, are appreciated, and that they matter, because they really, really do. We know how important Black voices are to the Democratic Party, but also to the nation at large. And that's why it's so important. This race is important, and all of the races that we see across this country right now. We have a unique thing that we can do this election cycle. In this election cycle, we are seeing a number of African Americans stand up and vie for the United States Senate. So if you think about it, there are only 3 African Americans that are currently in the United States Senate at this point. There's Cory Booker from New Jersey, there's Kamala Harris in California, and then there's Tim Scott here in South Carolina. When I am elected United States Senator here in South Carolina, South Carolina will become the first state to have 2 African American senators serve at the very same time.
And Brother Harrison,
yes.
Can you turn your video on again, please?
Oh, it's the video. Is it off?
Yes, sir. There you go. There you go. We got you now.
Thank you. Well, you don't notice it. I'm just looking at myself talking.
Yeah. Understood.
Well, thank you for highlighting that, Brandon. But listen, this is a historic moment, and particularly in the South, it's an historic moment in this election cycle. What I've been talking about on this campaign trail is about the emergence of what I'm calling a new South. And that new South is bold, it's inclusive, and it's diverse. It's so important to make sure that we have our voices at the leadership table. When laws are made and written, as legislation is debated, it's important that African Americans have representation in those debates. I know how important it is from my time just serving on Capitol Hill as a staffer for Congressman Jim Clyburn. When I was the floor director of the Majority Whip's office, many times I was one of the most senior people on Capitol Hill in terms of staff, but many times in those back rooms, as you're making the negotiations and deciding what component will be in each bill, I was the only voice of color, and specifically a Black voice, in the room. And if it were not for Jim Clyburn being in the leadership and then selecting a Black person to sit and represent his office in that leadership, then our voices would not have been heard. And regardless of, people are well-intentioned, and I appreciate that. And I know that folks are allies, and I appreciate that as well. But there's nothing like having people who have real experience sitting at that table. So when they started talking about issues that impact particularly poor African Americans that may be on utilizing the SNAP program or needing housing assistance through the HUD programs, I lived that. I know what that is like. And so I was able to give a perspective that nobody else in the room could provide. And that's what we need in terms of in the United States Senate as well. We need folks who have that type of experience. Now, you all know my story. My mom was 16 when she had me. I grew up in Orangeburg. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. She quit school to pick cotton, and then she went on to work in the textile industry. My grandfather quit school in 4th grade. He had to work at a dairy, and then he worked construction most of his life until he became diabetic. And so these are 2 amazing people with great backgrounds in terms of working hard, but they didn't have a whole lot of money. They didn't have a whole lot of education, but they taught me the value of working hard. They taught me the value of helping other people when you can. And that's really important. And that's that type of perspective that we need. I went on to go to Yale undergrad. I came back home and taught 9th grade social studies. And then I worked at a nonprofit to help other low-income kids just like me go on to college. After that, I went to Georgetown, and then I got an opportunity to work on Capitol Hill with Congressman Jim Clyburn, from the House Democratic Caucus to the Majority Whip's office. We did a lot of things to impact in a positive fashion African Americans across this country. And then I came back here in 2012 and became the first African American chair of the South Carolina Democratic Party. This race is important because we need to bring hope back to South Carolina. South Carolina desperately needs a United States senator who will fight for all of its people, and specifically people who need the most help. You know, as I tell folks all the time, that, you know, we need a senator that will fight for us and not fight against us. And right now we have a senator in Lindsey Graham who is doing nothing other than pumping himself up. You know, Lindsey's only thing that he cares about is his own political relevance. He doesn't care about the things that people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Doesn't care about the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of people in the state of South Carolina who don't have health care. But if they lived in any other state, they probably would. He doesn't care about the fact that we've had 4 rural hospitals that are closed, that 2 years ago, 14 of our 46 counties had no OBGYNs. Doesn't care about 38% of rural communities in South Carolina that have no access to Wi-Fi. And those communities that do have Wi-Fi, it's so slow that it's slower than the Wi-Fi you find in Cuba and Venezuela. He doesn't care about the fact that communities, rural communities, 40 of them, have lead levels higher than the federal standards. We have to do better, and we will do better. But in the first step for us doing better is making sure that our voters, people of color, African Americans, are first registered to vote, secondly, are informed about the importance of voting, and third, that they are actually mobilized to go out and cast that ballot. So I've been traveling all across South Carolina, going to places where no Democrat or anybody has ever been. And we need to make sure we're spending time reaching out to people, letting them know that we understand the pains that they're going through and the barriers that they're facing, and that we, as a party, you know, in terms of my party, I know you guys but we are in touch with those things that they're dealing with, and that they may feel left out of the political process, but they won't be left out any longer. You know, right now there are about 400,000 unregistered people of color in the state of South Carolina. The bulk of those folks are African American. That's a significant number. Just know this. In 2008, Barack Obama lost the state of South Carolina to John McCain by 150,000 votes. We got 400,000 unregistered people of color in the state. And so we can swing elections. We can swing elections if we get those folks registered, if we get those folks informed, if we get them excited about this election, and if we can mobilize them to go out and vote. And so, you know, it's important that we do this work. It's important also that we protect them when they go out to exercise that right. We just had our primary here in South Carolina, and let me tell you, it was a disaster. There were candidates left off of the ballot. There were long lines. You know, enough is enough with the voter suppression. Enough is enough with the obstacles that people have in terms of going out to vote. When I'm a United States Senator, one of the very first bills that I'm going to draft and submit for consideration is a bill to criminalize anybody that is caught trying to suppress voters in this country. And that includes secretaries of state. If you are purging thousands and hundreds of thousands of voters for no reason other than saying, well, we don't know if they still live in that same house, that's not a good enough reason to take somebody's vote away from them. If they haven't told you that they've moved, then you got to consider that they are still staying in that same place. They may have just decided that they're not going to vote because there's nobody there worth voting for. But you can't take away their franchise. You just can't do that. And so, we're going to follow a similar model to what Stacey Abrams ran in Georgia. We have to get the African American vote registered and mobilized to vote. And that's really important. So listen, I know you all got plenty of questions. And at the end, I want to give you what my story of hope is all about, the thing that keeps me motivated. But in the meantime, let's take some of the questions that you all have. Thank you again for the support and allowing me to be on with you. And thank you for all that you are doing to make sure that people of color and specifically Black voters have a voice in this process. Brandon, am I going back to you all?
Yep. Hey, thank you so much, Jaime. Your words and your work is powerful and inspiring. I'm excited about everything that you're doing in this political season. I read your book, Climbing the Hill, and that just opened my eyes to so much. And I know personally so many young folks who you've taken under your wing over the years, and just watching them grow and soar. When you think about a leader, it's not someone who creates more followers, but a person who creates more leaders, and you're doing just that. So thank you so much. So to our viewing audience, continue to put your questions in the chat. I see we have a couple more coming in. Jaime, I would love to hear your perspective on, Amplify's work in this current political happenings while we go along. So the first question, if we got it up, it's from Mr. Jamar Brown. I think you know him, Jaime.
Love Jamar.
Yeah. His question is, how do we encourage more Black men to serve on local boards and commissions and other entities to prepare them to run for office? Second part of that is, if we change the face of politics, we have a better chance to influence policy.
Amen. Listen, Jamar is at the front line and has been training young brothers and sisters across this country for years now. And I'm so proud of the work that he does in this space. And many of you know that this is something that I'm very passionate about. One, I wrote a book called Climbing the Hill. And it's a guide for young people who may not be well connected, may not have family that's, run for office and all, but are interested in building a career in politics, from working on Capitol Hill or interning in state houses. It's an important guide for those young people who don't have those connections and those experiences, so that they know how to navigate that process. But I've also done, it's not just about your words, it's about your actions. Here in South Carolina, I created the James E. Clyburn Political Fellowship, which I believe has been one of the greatest things that has changed the landscape of political thought leaders in this state for probably this generation. I mean, we are now in our 5th class of Clyburn Fellows, and there's a lot of African-American men and women that are part of this Clyburn Fellowship class. And these folks have been elected to State House, to city councils and town councils. There are currently a number of fellows that are running for office right now. Hamilton Grant is one of our fellows who's running for county council here in Columbia. Our fellows are also county party chairs right now in a number of the county parties across South Carolina. And so it's important that we get that type of representation. We have to have a seat at the table. It is so important that we do that in order to change politics. Because if you're not, Antoine says this all the time, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu, which is so true. And so we need to make sure that our young brothers and sisters are there and that they have a role. It was so heartening to see when we had those 20 presidential candidates show up, and guess who was running their campaigns? Now, I can tell you, back 10 years when Barack Obama ran in 2008, I remember the big discussion I had with like Anton Gunn and Kelly Adams and a group of us, Clay Middleton, and we all met and said, we got to figure out how we get some Black folks to run these campaigns. Because before then, no Black person had ever run a statewide campaign in South Carolina for a presidential candidate. Oh, wow. And that year, we got Kelly over in the Hillary camp, and we got Stacey Brayboy to do Barack Obama. And then Anton Gunn was a political director. And that was a sea change. And to see the sisters and the brothers build on top of that for this election cycle felt so good, because it meant that we had made progress and we're making change. And so folks, continue to get involved. Go to the library. My publisher would say, go buy the book, but go to the library. You can get it from the public library, get the book, read it. And I think it'll give you a good roadmap on how to navigate the political process and make a difference.
Yeah, it really helped me. Thank you. I think I bought two and gave another one to a friend. So
I appreciate it.
let's see. KJ asked a question. Thanks for your time, Jamie. I'm interested in your specific legislative plans on economically empowering Black people in South Carolina.
Thank you, KJ, and thank you for all your work. I know you do good work down in the Low Country, man, and we really appreciate it. Listen, in about a week, we are going to roll out a comprehensive plan that probably nobody has done here in a long time about how specifically we revitalize our rural communities, and I'm specifically targeting the many of those very poor. When you look at where is the greatest level of poverty in South Carolina, it's in our rural communities, and particularly some of the Black rural communities in Black counties, that area that folks call a quarter of shame. It's a multi-pronged proposal, and I'm going to see if I can pull it up, and then I can give you all. I mean, there's so much stuff in here, from how we give our historically Black colleges and universities a new direction. We are creating what I call centers of excellence. And what I'm asking our HBCUs to do, and we'll dedicate federal funds that go to the historically Black colleges and universities to do two things. One, to partner with these small rural communities, and many of them have small Black mayors and are Black mayors are running these communities. But to partner with these communities and play the role that you normally see a group like McKinsey plays, to do an analysis of some of the issues that these communities are dealing with on a day-to-day basis and helping them come up with proposals. And the students at the universities that are working on those will get loan forgiveness as a part of the program. There will also be a dedicated source of revenue from the federal government that comes to the historically Black colleges, a set of revenue that they can count on long-term to do and continue to grow. We are also asking them in these centers of excellence to partner with small businesses and have small business incubators in those. So African Americans who have this great idea about how they start a small business, they want to start a daycare in a community that doesn't have it but don't know how to start, then there will be a set of resources embedded in these centers of excellence to help launch and initiate these programs. We also want to look at apprenticeships. One of the big barriers for so many African Americans is that, for folks who decide not to go to college, but they still want to have a career where they can get a living wage. Making sure that we can get technical degrees to those folks out of high school, and then partnering them with local businesses and some of the large manufacturers for some initial apprenticeship programs while they're in high school, so that they then can transition to long-term jobs once they get out of high school. But there's so many things, from infrastructure to education. We're exploring Cory Booker's baby bonds initiative and looking at how we can tinker with that a little bit so that it better suits the folks here in South Carolina. But there's so much that we need to do in order to make sure that folks can live the American dream, and particularly the African Americans who've been denied that opportunity for generations upon generations.
Jamie, everything that you said, I believe, is right on point. One of the things that we learned during the presidential cycle was how difficult it is for Black folks to get capital, especially when you have your own business or starting a business or a program. It's very difficult to get access to capital. And then even in our endeavor here in Amplify, there's very little research out there surrounding Black men. So everything that you said, I think, is right on time. Now,
there aren't very many Black think tanks, right? And right. Many of our communities can't afford to go to McKinsey and get them on retainer to study these issues and problems. And we have so many problems. Like, we got 40 communities right now, most of them Black, where the lead level is higher than the federal standards. Yeah. So what do you do if you're a small town? I talked to a few of our small town mayors, all of them Black, who are having tremendous water and infrastructure issues because the infrastructure in their towns was put in the 40s and the 50s. One has a water tank that was built in the 1930s, and they're still using that water tank. And there's so much stuff that is, Deanna's on here. She can tell you about so much stuff that is going on in these small towns, and it's having an impact on the quality of life of the people who live in those communities. And so that's why it's so important that we have something, because one of the mayors told me, well, Congressman Clyburn got us a grant through the federal government. But the problem is, Jamie, we had to give the grant back because we couldn't do the federal match.
Wow.
We couldn't do the federal match. So if you have communities that are so poor that they can't do even though they get a grant from the federal government, but they can't do the match, then the system is broken. And I want to see if we can create a pot. We can give tax write-offs for corporations, but create a pot of money that small communities, rural communities, can access from the private sector in order to count as the match so that they can get the needed infrastructure that they need to bring back into their communities.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And we have a couple questions coming in. Let's see. So working across the aisle is essential for the success of our country and our state. Have you thought through what a working relationship with Senator Tim Scott could look like?
Yeah, listen, I have a good relationship with Tim, a cordial one, I'd say that. Tim and I don't look at the world in the same way, but he's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. And I try my best to, when people are saying nasty, negative things that they just shouldn't say about him, I try to stand up and defend them, because nobody should be subjected to that. We're different people. We're not a monolith as a people. We're going to all look at the world in different ways, and that's based on our experiences. And so at the very least, we have to respect that. Now, folks know me, that I've had a history of working across the aisle with anybody. If you are for trying to improve the state that I love so dearly, South Carolina, I'll work with you. I don't care who you are, because we should do that. When I was chair of the state party, everybody knows that one of my best friends in politics was Matt Moore, the Republican chair. Matt and I used to work together on a lot of different things. We even visited a prison here in Columbia together. We worked on some legislation over in the legislature together. And I'll continue to try to find folks like that who want to find some common ground so that we can continue to move the ball forward and make South Carolina as the best state that she can be.
And that's it. We have to put the best for everyone at the forefront and put the partisanship to the side. And for those who don't know, Amplify is a nonprofit, so we're nonpartisan. Yep. In our efforts. Joseph White has a question. He asked, how can Black men take the passion garnered over the past week's events and turn it into action into this political cycle?
Yeah. Well, I think this falls right into the work of what Amplify is doing. I mean, it is so important. And I know people go but it's so important that we participate in our and vote. And I just cannot underemphasize how important it is. And why is that important? It is important because every aspect of your life, think about anything that you've done, from your driver's license to when you can become eligible to drive, to your insurance rates, to your student loan rates, to to the grand juries that are placed in the criminal justice system. Every single one of those things are touched by your vote. And when you decide not to do it, in essence, you are saying I want you to pick the person that you dislike the most. Just find the person that just, gets under your skin, that doesn't have the same values as you or anything. Pick that person. So when you decide that you're not going to vote, you are giving your power, the power over all those things that impact you. You are giving it to that person. And that's why it's important. Our juries are determined by voter rolls, right? So we can't complain about the juries. They're all white juries if none of us are going out to vote. Because if we don't vote, then we can't sit on the jury. We aren't called up. And so it's important that we participate in that function in order to change it. And listen, I know change happens from all types of ways. It happens internally, it happens externally. But we can't afford as a community not to do it all. We have to have that external pressure. And that's what we're seeing with the protest and all. And it's so great that all of that is going on. But we also have to have that internal pressure. We have to elect people to Congress, to city council, county council, to the state house that reflect our values and understand what we're going through as a community and what we need as a community. And that's what I'm asking folks to do. And this election, and I know we say this, it's like a broken record, but it really is true that this election is probably the most important election of my lifetime. If you don't know this, and again, I know Amplify is nonpartisan, but I'm just going to give you the facts here. At this moment, Donald Trump has probably appointed 20 to 25% of the judges that currently sit on the federal benches. And many of these judges are younger, and some of them don't even believe in the standard law. Some of them, in their testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, would not say that they believed in Brown versus Board as a grounded law. Think about how scary that is. When you don't believe that Brown versus Board is the law of the land, or you can't say it, right? So it's important. It's so important that we win these local races, but it's important that we win back the White House. It's also important that we take the Senate. It's really, really important.
Yeah, Bremian. James Smith just asked a question. I see it here in the chat. James Smith, I know you remember him. I think he's up in New York now.
Brother James, what's going on?
So James said, love what you said about allyship. How can those of us who were so inspired by you to get out of poverty in South Carolina can do more with our platform to be better allies and make sure we don't take too much space?
Yeah. Well, James, you do something great, man. You are a listener. You know, you're not just a talker, you're a listener. And that's the first step is listening and feeling the pain and hurt that you see in your brothers and sisters from other communities. That's the first step. And then the second step is that all together that we recognize that the problem is that the system is broken, and that the responsibility of fixing the system just doesn't fall on the weight on Black shoulders. It has to be all of us working together in order to fix that. And that's what I see. And that's what gives me so much hope when I see the protests all around the country and here in South Carolina, that it's not just Black folks protesting and carrying the signs, but it's all folks. And, you know, from all different communities and backgrounds. And that is something that I have not seen before. In all of the protests and all that have happened over the decades and the years, I just haven't seen that type of unified response. And it gives me hope that this is going to be different, that this is going to be a different moment. But I think it's also important to just make sure that when you can, James, and when, you know, other allies can, amplify the voices of Black folks. Put them up and say, hey, you know, sometimes you sit in these meetings and people will automatically just turn to, you know, the white person there as the voice, the valued voice. And then sometimes I think for our allies is to say, you know what, I think such and such knows more about this issue than I do. Why don't we hear from them? I think that's really important so that folks break out of this cycle of putting people in boxes and relegating them to a space. Because I think many times where folks get trapped is that they think that only Black folks can talk about Black issues. But Black folks go through everything else. We can talk about everything else. And yes, Jamar has a good thing too. Donate to Black-led organizations. Make sure in your hiring, you are hiring other people other than folks that look like you or come from similar backgrounds or if you get fortunate enough to get on a board of directors of a committee or of an organization or a company, make sure you, instead of look in the mirror and say, well, this is what I look like, let me find somebody that doesn't look like me to sit on this board, to bring a different perspective. Utilize Black companies as well. There are a lot of Black small businesses that need the help. And so look at, when you are looking at vendors, just say, you know what, we're catering this event. Let me see if we can find a minority-owned company as a caterer, or you're doing something else, and look at for vendors in those communities as well. That's how our allies can really help move this to the next level.
Yeah, that's a big part of this. There's many opportunities to diversify your investment, and that's one thing that we try to make a top priority here in South Carolina during this past cycle. And with Amplify Action, that's one thing that we want to do is increase the investment we make on the ground to create infrastructure to mobilize Black men. So you're right on that one. We'll take our last two questions here. And Rashad Gaines, Rashad said, Jaime, which committee assignments will allow you to do the most work for our home state of South Carolina?
So I've already told the Senate folks I want to sit on appropriations. That's where the money is. I mean, it's not about authorization. I know many of us were like, and listen, I would love to sit on the Health Committee as well. That's a great thing about the Senate. You can sit on multiple committees, whereas in the House, you're sort of relegated only to select one or two. In the Senate, you can sit on multiple ones. And so as it relates to authorizing, I would love to be on the Health Committee, which is the Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, because healthcare and education are probably the two things that we really need to fight the most for here in South Carolina. But as it relates to my number one committee that I would like to sit on, it is appropriations, because it touches every aspect of this government, and it's about the money, how the money is spent and where the money is spent. And I want to be in those discussions.
You know what they say, if you show me where they spend the money, you show me where their priorities are. So
amen to that.
I think that's perfect for you. And our very last question comes from Marilyn Hemingway down in the Low Country. Marilyn asks, what can we do as individuals on the ground to ensure fair representative voting processes in November? Primary day was problematic, with many not aware of the mechanics of voting.
Yeah, we got to do a better job of civics in this country, and particularly in this state. There's so many people who just don't understand how the process works, and I think we as a community have to do a better job of educating our folks on that. And I put this on our we got Black superintendents across South Carolina who run school districts that are primarily Black. We need to do a better job in those school districts of educating our young people about the X's and O's of voting and being a productive citizen in this environment. Let them understand how all of this works, that in a primary, you're voting for just one party, right? And not voting for both. But there's simple things that many of us probably take for granted because we're politicos that many people just don't know. The second thing I would say is, and I just had a call today with members of the South Carolina Democratic Party about doing some things to be proactive as it relates to voting, because voting was a disaster on primary day here in South Carolina. I know a lot of the national spotlight has been on Georgia, but there were a lot of problems here. People were left off ballots, long lines. For me, long lines don't make me feel good. And some people say, "Oh, it makes me feel so good." No, long lines say that something's dysfunctional. It's not working. And many times the consolidation of precincts, it took place in Black communities. And then sometimes they didn't consolidate them in the nearest precinct. There could be a white precinct that's right next to the Black precinct, but they took the two Black precincts that were 15 miles away and then they consolidated that. That makes no sense. And so we got to be proactive in this process. One of the things I'm asking the South Carolina Democratic Party and my campaign will be moving to going to each of these county election commissions and asking, What is your game plan if you need to consolidate precincts? Which precincts are you consolidating? Does it make sense? Are they the two precincts nearest to each other? In the African American precincts, how many voting machines? This African American precinct has 1,000 voters. This white precinct has 1,000 voters. How many voting machines, working voting machines, are you allocating to that precinct compared to the black precinct? We have to really have that level of granularity to make sure that operationally we don't suppress the vote here in South Carolina. So as individuals, what I'm saying is go to your election commissions and ask these very important questions. What is the game plan if the coronavirus is still here? What is the game plan in terms of protecting folks? At the same time, make sure you're putting the pressure on the legislature. They only allowed the absentee for the coronavirus as an excuse for the primary. We don't have that provision for the general election. So we need to put that pressure on them. At the same time, Marilyn, you are right. We need to encourage younger folks to get training to be poll workers at the election in your county precincts and for the elections. Because what we saw in Richland County was a number of their poll workers the day of just saying, you know what, we're not showing up. And as a result, they were scrambling because they didn't have a game plan. And so we need to be proactive, not reactive. People are like, well, we can always sue. I want to get before we have to go sue. Let's set the record straight and get that information right beforehand so that it justifies us going to do a lawsuit further down the road. But thank you all again for all of your passion and what you're doing. And I can't thank Amplify Action enough for your leadership. And I mean, this is just such a great and tremendous idea. And I'm just so proud of the leaders that you all, Brandon, you have a touch of gold, man. You've been doing it and you will continue to do it. And I'm so proud of you and all of the other leaders across South Carolina that are lifting up this action.
Thank you so much, Jaime. Thank you for being here. I know you have a crazy schedule right now in your race. Thank you for just taking the time to join us. And I know we had a lot of questions in the chat box that we're not going to be able to get to, but folks, you can keep asking your questions. Our team will answer them in the chat and offline. So we want to keep this conversation going. But I just want to, again, thank you, Jaime, for your inspiring words, for continuously encouraging, little brown boys like me from the sticks of South Carolina who has a vision and a dream to do a little bit more. Your support is near and dear to my heart, and our team just thank you for everything that you're doing and everything that you will do. But for everyone on here, as we close this evening, I want to call you to action. It will take action for us to change and to create the change that we all desire. I'm asking you to do 3 things this evening. 1, please go into our website and sign up, become a member, join us. You can go to ampourvote.com. And make sure that you're getting our emails and our text updates. And I promise you, we won't bombard your inbox. We're not going to, drive you crazy, but we do want to keep you updated with what all the great work that we have coming up. Our team members across the country, will be participating in events this week. We have some more virtual events. One is with Congressman Butterfield from North Carolina. We have a very, very important announcement that we're making this weekend about a special Congresswoman who will be joining us. And I'm sure all of you will want to be on here. It's just so important. And you can also, through our website, register to vote. But in addition to that, the second thing I need you to do, it really, for us to do what we're seeking out to do, it's going to take us all working together, yes, but it also takes money. We need the resources to be able to have the real impact that we need to educate, motivate, and mobilize Black men across the South. Folks don't do this because it's so expensive. But we understand that if we rally our community, we can achieve all things. So no donation is too small. You can give $5 and spare, that coffee on your way to work, or that bag of chips, right? Every dollar counts. So please, I'm asking you to donate. The link is scrolling below down here. So please give. We're also going to drop it in the comments so that you can just click and go. But also on our website in the top right-hand corner, it says donate. You can do it there. And then the third thing that I'm asking, please follow us on all of our social media outlets and share it with at least 5 of your friends. Together, we can amplify this message, right? We've launched online and on our website and across all social media platforms. You can follow us at Amp Our Vote on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat. And thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Jaime. He just said he donated. I appreciate it. But everyone, the mission of Amplify Action is, I honestly believe this, that we can be the best organization in the world to engage Black men. Right now, our number one competitor is the criminal justice system. And we need a counterbalance to that. There's no reason why we can't organize our own communities. When you look at what's happening across the country, if there was just a single intentional investment in organizing and creating infrastructure to engage Black men for positive change, we would actually and honestly see it. We're taking this mantle into our own hands because we believe that we've been prepared through our careers to do just this. And we're not going to stop and start with the folks that are in good suits with good jobs and good educations. We are going to our communities. I was raised in Winfield Town in Aiken, South Carolina. And if you understand or know anything about Winfield Town, it is not the country club. I was raised by my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, because my father was sentenced in jail. He's serving a life sentence right now. I remember being in the Gap in Aiken and watching chaos take place as a young boy. I remember my grandmother looking at me and saying, "You are the one. You are the one that was chosen in our family to do something more." And I know there are other young men all across this country who had the same exact experience that I had. And I want to make sure Amplify Action is that tool to show them that they can do more. So many people say when President Obama was elected, we could see ourselves serving in the highest office in the land. But at that same time, when we saw Brother Floyd on the ground, having the life squeezed out of him and calling for his mother, we could also see ourselves on that ground dying in front of an audience on camera. And we have to do something about it. Our folks are out in the streets right now fighting for change. And that is one part of how to get this done. The other part to creating the change that we want to see is to mobilize, organize, and vote. That is our part and our contribution to this. If we organize our vote, we can hold people accountable to the changes we want to see in this world. So I'm imploring you, I'm begging you, join us because we can't do this alone. There's enough work to go around. We're partnering with as many organizations as we can because it takes a full village to raise up the next generation and make it the way it's supposed to be, fair and just for all. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Again, I'm Brandon Upson. If y'all can bring Eladria back on. Miss Eladria Drummond. This is our Chief Programs Officer, our head sister in charge here. I took many cues from Eladria. Eladria, do you have anything for us to take us out?
Just really appreciate you guys, getting on here to hear what Amplify is all about, and hoping that you guys will stand in solidarity with us as we push to do what's right here and honor our, all of the fallen, brothers and sisters at this time, and that we want to really push out what we're going to be doing and push our initiative to make sure that, we're heard. So I just really appreciate you guys coming out on our launch day, and really showing your support. Thank you, Jaime, for being here. We really appreciate it. And that's all I have. I'm really excited. So.
Thank you again, Jaime. Thank you everyone for joining us. Stay tuned. We have another one with Congressman Butterfield tomorrow. Like our page. You'll see more information about our upcoming events. But please spread the message, join us, and let's fight this thing together, because together we can win, and together we can amplify our voices, amplify our vote, and amplify the change that we want to see in the world. Thank you so much.